team.
Hey there, this is Malorian, and this is the Orc Tactical Team, and the topic we're going to be talking about today is something that's kind of near and dear to my heart, and it's all about Hordes. Now, of course, as soon as 8th came out, I loved Hordes. The whole idea of them, they're like, yeah, basically take your little blocks you used to have before. And remember, I used to play back when there were ranks as just 4 guys. There used to be like these tiny little blocks. And it's like, how always go big? Just take a big, huge mass of guys. And it's not like before you could do that, but now there's actually a point to it. You're getting extra attacks, and blah, you go and you kill stuff. However, Hordes have a big footprint. And you have to be very, very careful on how you use these guys, or else you start bumbling into each other, getting caught up, and just not being very effective. So the question was, Malorian, how do you use these blocks, these hordes, in a way that they're not going to be bumping into each other? Now, of course, we're going to have to kind of break this up a little bit, because how you handle one horde is vastly different to how you handle 5 hordes, right? So we're going to kind of start from the easy part and move our way along. Now, if we're talking about one horde, we're talking about armies, something like Lizardmen. Lizardmen like running one horde because they take their one big thing, Thesaurus, and they got lots of support all over. You know, they got all their skinks, all their salamanders, all their pterodons, all this stuff going around causing trouble. But at the same time, they get their one still strong core coming through to clean things up. Now, with that, really the biggest thing you're having is that it's not so much that you're needing to avoid terrain and other hordes or something like that. The biggest thing you're making sure is that that one block is being able to focus on its one thing to do its job. If that one horde is meeting 3 other blocks from the other side, they're going to start, fleeing and hitting your flank and stuff like that. So you need to use the rest of your army to protect it. So, of course, one of the things you want to do first is drop down all your chaff first so that they're going to have to stop dropping down their major blocks. So you're going to know where you want that one horde to go. Then once you start moving up, make sure that you're going to stop their redirectors. If you have one horde, they're going to say like, oh, I just got to redirect this, clean up their chaff, I win. So make sure, like in this example here, skinks, those guys are going up there and they're shooting away the eagles or the wolf cav, whatever it is that they'd be wanting to use to redirect you. Meanwhile, you have to make sure you're using your own chaff as well to slow down and redirect their army. Because like I said, you just can't be teamed up there. And then after that, you just got to start charging in and click, 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 moving along. And that's really how it goes with the one horde. Now, if it's 2 hordes, one of the biggest mistakes I see is if you have one horde on one flank and one horde on the other flank, what the opponent does is just targets on one. So what you want to do there is the same type of thing. You want to start going and putting your chaff out there, and then once you know where their weak points are going to be, well, that's where you're going to be putting your 2 hordes to work in unison. It's probably going to be on one flank or the other, and of course you probably want to have your fastest horde up on the actual board edge, just because what's going to be happening here is you want to be sweeping across with those hordes. And there's no real problem with that, right? You might not catch everything because they might be following you around, like they're going around the other way at the same time, but at the same time, you're just trying to slow them down and using these hordes to swing around and kill stuff. Now, this is where we have to first talk about terrain, because also once you get to 2 hordes, terrain is starting to be an issue. And honestly, it could be that when you're looking at the board, no matter where they're placing down their strong units or their weak units, terrain might dictate where you're going to be putting your stuff. Now, there's lots of different terrain in Warhammer Fantasy. Some of it really affects hordes, some of it doesn't, and some of it only psychologically affects horde players, which hopefully if they watch this, they won't be bothered by it anymore. So let's talk about the stuff that really does hurt the hordes, and that's the impassable stuff. Impassable stuff is like buildings where you just can't move through them. And so really, if you see on one flank there's a building, that could be a real problem, because all of a sudden, not only is it a thing where you have to realize you have to kind of like swing around this building you get there, it could be that there's no room for your horde whatsoever. If you see a building near to a board edge, remember, Warhammer Fantasy is a game where you're allowed to pre-measure, so get there and make sure it fits, right? If your horde is X inches across, make sure that you have that space there. Now, here's another common mistake. if my horde, let's just throw it out there, is 10 inches across, and I measure, and a gap is 10 inches across, or 10 and a half inches across, whatever it is, something close like that, you can't say like, whew, I am fine, I'm going to fit. Because what happens is, remember, you have to stay 1 inch away from terrain. So really, you need 12 inches across in order to fit through there. Now, of course, it depends whether you're on what size of base your guys are on, the 20 or the 25 mil. But the big thing here is just make sure to measure those things out. And as well, remember too that when you're going through that, not only do you have the space to go through, you need to space the wheel. Now, the question becomes, what happens if you don't have room to use that? Well, hopefully, if the whole gameplay allows it, you can avoid it, right? If the hard terrain is on one flank, I'm going to put my hordes on the other flank. Because a lot of armies, they'll try and defend one side, but they'll always have the other side you can attack. If you are playing against something that's more fast, more mobile, you know you're going to have to try and deal with this. Like if you're up against like a dodgy Dark Elves or Wood Elves or whatever, and you see that setup, you know they're going to be going over there completely to try and avoid you and run around you. Like they'll put stuff on the other flank, and this is just zip right back over, right? So really what you need to do there is actually use your horde to plug the gap. Now, this is where you can get to the idea where we're in that whole pendulum thing. So the idea of your horde is not always just a punch straight up. It's going to be more wheeling around. And so what can happen is if you have that one building there, you're going to line up your hordes with it. One horde is going to walk right up to it and stop. They're going to stop right there and say, that's it. You can charge me and I'm going to kick your ass, but most likely I've just closed this off. Now you can't get by, and this is closed. And meanwhile, the other horde is the one that's swinging around and has the whole hammer and anvil effect. And that works very well. At the same time, there's no reason why you need to make it sure that you are stuck there yourself. If you can't fit in 10 men wide, well, go 9 across, or 8 across, or 7, or whatever you need to do to get through there. It's funny how some people just take their tray and say, well, I'm stuck. Or maybe they have it like in 2 groups of 5. So it's like, well, I'm either 5 or 10. That's all I can do. No, take your time. And if you need to put a few guys on the side, it really doesn't add that much time to your game to just grab the grouping and just throw it on the side. It really isn't that bad. If you are a more competitive gamer and you are really worried about all the time and exact measurements, sure, maybe throw some extra bases in there, right? I don't think you need to do that. Like I said, just go, and even if I'm 10 wide, take some of those guys off, put them behind. Sure, you have some empty base hanging out there, but whatever. We're all grown-ups. We realize that you're actually just using this part here. And if that empty part of the base has to go underneath the tower or underneath other units in order just for the move the things around, it's not really a big deal. And then that way, you can actually be pushing through there. Now, that can be a great idea. However, always watch too. I mean, if going into horde formation is going to mean that you can't win a combat, all right, then you just have to stay in horde formation and block that hole. But if you can go down, like a lot of times, my Savage Orc Biggins or my Black Orcs, they can just go down to 7 or whatever if I wanted, and they will just still chop the hell out of everything they want. So it's just taking that time to do it. Now, before I get on to the 3 hordes, which is now more the Malorian style, I should talk a little bit more about terrain and some of the other things that can affect you or not affect you. Well, hills. Hills are something where they really don't affect much of anything in the game. If it's a scree slope so that you're being hurt while you charge over or something like that, sure, that can have a little bit of effect, but actually, to be honest, a lot of times when I'm playing games with hills, I always ask my opponent, are you fine with us just taking the hill off? Because for the most part, it does nothing. Often in tournaments, they're not the Anvil of Vol or anything like that, where it could be like, if you got magical and flaming attacks, okay, that's actually kind of cool. But for the vast majority of tournaments, they just act as common hills, which really just act as an easy way to pour out your models and make them tip out if you haven't magnetized them or something. So really, that's just nothing terrain, and it doesn't really do anything at all. Another one that I think is always funny is the forest. The forest, it used to be so scary. So especially if there's old gamers, they see a forest and like, oh man, I gotta stay the hell away from it. But really, forests aren't that big of a worry whatsoever. It used to be that if you got your block and it was in a forest whatsoever, it was moving half speed. And so basically, once you got there, you were just out of the game because you were going to then be so slow that just you're wasting your time. Now that's not the case. Now you just zip right through, and the only negative is that you lose steadfast. But here's the key. You only lose steadfast if the majority of your models are inside the forest. If the majority of them aren't, it's not doing a damn thing. It's not doing anything whatsoever, except for, you know, maybe even sometimes too, where you have the majority in there, it's giving you cover, right? I've been up against shooting opponents and stuff where I just say, oh, Horde, go right through that forest. Because you know what? I might be steadfast, but the reason why I'm taking the Horde is because it's so damn killy and wins combat. Why do I care if I lose steadfast? And meanwhile, I can be getting cover or whatever other abilities that forest gives you. Now, keep in mind, if that is your plan to send your Horde through that forest, you make sure that you want to take some other smaller unit to go in there first, just in a deployment. Just like, hey, Wolf Rider, go put a toe in that forest. Is it a Venom Thicket? That's the big one. If it's a Venom Thicket, don't go in that forest, because taking those dangerous terrains on all those guys going through can really start adding up by the time you get through that forest. So otherwise, though, yeah, just go right through that thing. Another one I see sometimes that can really affect things is the river. Now, the river is kind of deadly to everything. Now, I guess before I get to the river, I want to say one more thing about steadfast. Remember, you're taking that Horde because it kicks butt, but there are times where it is going to lose. Let's say if you're facing 2 Charybdis. Well, normally, if I'm facing that with my guys, I'll be sure, yeah, come in, I'm going to kick your butt. You might win combat with Thunderstomps, I'm going to be steadfast, and then I'll finish you off. You get caught by 2 Charybdis inside a forest when you lose steadfast, that's really dicey. So do watch out for those things. Now, another big one, like I was saying, was the rivers, and here's the big difference between rivers and the forests. Basically, the rivers are the old forests. If you touch that river whatsoever, bam, you're not getting steadfast, you are not getting a rank bonus. It is a huge deal. Plus, you have to go half speed. So it's really, really bad. Or I think you just can't march, so you're just going slow, or whatever the workout is. But basically, you're going half speed. So that can be really, really bad. Now, at the same time, I've seen some people where they'll take their Hordes and they'll completely ignore or move to the other side of this river. And what that allows the opponent to do is say, like, oh, the Hordes are going over there? Great. I'm going to put my redirectors over there. All my shooting stuff will be over here. And I'm going to castle on this side. Well, you know what? Going through that river could be a thing where it's just going to lose you about a turn worth, right? If you set it up so you're going to march up to it, and then you're going to be spending 1 turn basically moving in, 1 turn moving out, you've basically lost 1 turn. If you go and you deploy on the opposite side, and they're in that corner, and between like the extra marching to get there, the redirecting, everything else, this could be easily a thing where you lose 2 to 3 turns. So this one really is terrain dependent and situation dependent, but definitely look at that where sometimes, again, okay, I'm losing my rank bonus, I'm losing my steadfast, but I don't care because I'm a Horde and I'm killy, right? I'm just going to go through this anyway. With this as well, remember that all rivers are supposed to be having a bridge. I don't know how many battle reports I've seen or tournaments where people are putting down rivers and there's no bridge. There's supposed to be one for everyone. Now, again, they might not make the bridge so a whole Horde can go across, but hey, if you see that and you really want to move that unit across there, hey, make it the 6 wide, whatever wide, march across, next turn go to Horde formation, you still lose that turn, but at no point were you stuck in the river. So that's another way you can get through that. Let's turn this to Malorian. What do you do if you run 3 Hordes? Now, to me, 3 Hordes is all about having my battle plan in front of me. I'm looking at, I have a center, I have a left flank, I have a right flank. And really, I know if I'm going to be losing any one of those flanks, because if the right horde goes down, that means I lost the right flank, right? It's really, when I use 3 hordes, I'm just envisioning the whole landscape being cut into thirds, and I'm dedicating a horde to each one. You don't need to do it that way, though, right? At the same time, I'm taking my 3 hordes and gone off to one flank. Now, 3 hordes go, a good ways across, but still, if the terrain isn't in your way and you are moving over to the one side, you can definitely have this. 3 hordes should always be in a spot where you're catching everything with the leadership bubble, so everything is very nice that way. However, now that you're at 3, terrain can get a lot harder to avoid. Now, remember, if we look at the chart and see which things are the most popular, trees are very popular. They're number 7. On average, if you roll your dice, you're going to get a 7, and it's trees, which you don't really care about. You also can get things like walls and hills and stuff like that. And again, it's not going to affect you whatsoever. So, I mean, on a table that has 6 pieces of terrain, there might just be like 1 piece of terrain you even care about. So it really depends on whether you're looking at a table that was made by the book or one that was made by a tournament organizer or a tournament organizer specifically trying to screw over hordes. But definitely this is something where you've got to start really looking at the terrain and planning where things are going to be going around. And again, so important that you take that time before and you measure out and say, okay, can this horde fit in here? Where are things going to go? And this is especially now that you have 3 hordes, you can definitely take one and say, horde number 3, your whole goal in this game is to lock down this area, while the other 2 hordes are just going to swing around, right? They can shoot you, they can do whatever, but as long as they don't sneak out here, my other 2 hordes are just going to go and clean up and have no problems. So that's the time where you can really go and dedicate these things. I mean, locking down one horde and swinging down with the other, if they focus on that one, that can be trouble. If you got 2 hordes going around, all of a sudden it's a lot stronger of a situation. Now, with this too, where you might have terrain and either one swinging around one way or something, it could be that one of those outer hordes actually has to leave your leadership bubble. With that, really make sure that you are going to be having that outer horde be something that's dependable, right? You do not want to have like a horde of night goblins being like, oh yeah, you guys be on the outside and lock things down, because they'll just charge into them, beat them in combat, and they'll fail their steadfast 5 and they'll be toast. Meanwhile, you might want to do something like Black Orcs, because they're immune to Psych and they're almost never going to lose. Or I might go with Savage Orc Biggins. Like, even though they're just crazy and I have to worry about Frenzy and stuff like that, whatever. Go over there, have a grand time, go and kill stuff. Meanwhile, my more dependable troops, my Trolls, my Black Orcs, which won't fail animosity, we're going to be the ones that swing around and clean everything up, so that while you're looking at that, they're basically still doing the blocking job. They're just kind of doing a little warpath and killing little small things while they're doing that. So that's a big part there. Now, there's been other parts of this I can talk about, but they really come into their own when we get to this next step, and that's going to be talking about 4 hordes. 4 hordes is something I really enjoy, and at the same time, you have to then really decide where you're going to be placing things and what the roles of these hordes are going to be. In the past, like I said, the horde is, like in the 1 horde, this is my strong block. In the 2 hordes, we are the 2 strong blocks. We go around. In the 3 hordes, you are there to stop things sometimes, right? And the other 2 are to swing around. When you're at 4 hordes, this is the point where you should be specialized. You should be saying, okay, this horde is to do this horde is to do that, and each of these basically have a goal of something they're supposed to be doing. For example, in my part, I might have the Savage Orc Biggins, right? They're the guys that are supposed to be going in there. I find your regular troop, and it tears you apart. I have the Black Orcs. They're the ones that are really strong. They're going to be looking for the target that is going to be something strong, like a steam tank, have high armor, high toughness, something like that. Those are ones they're going to be going up against, right? the Squig Horde, they're the guys, or since I'm only toughness 3 and have no armor, I want to take their strongest unit onto me. If you have something with great weapons, great. Fight my Squigs. I don't give a damn, and I'll rip you up apart as well. So all of a sudden you're going to be specializing. However, again, now you really are at the point where you are covering a good chunk of the board, and avoiding terrain is almost impossible. You're also at a spot here where even if you do your best, there's probably going to be one horde, like pretty much guaranteed one horde, that's going to be not in your general's bubble. And that means that when you're designing your army, you need to be sure that one of those specializations for one of these hordes is this has to be a horde that can work away from my general. This is basically their goal. Like sometimes I'll do that with my Black Orcs because they're dependable, immune to psych, no animosity. I can give them the banner that gives them +1 speed, the banner of swiftness, and they can just rush up one flank, and I just let them do their thing while I manage the other 3 hordes. Now, coming here too is kind of the whole idea of now that you're attacking your opponent with 4 hordes, what is your opponent trying to do? If you're looking at through your opponent's eyes, they're looking at your army and they're saying, wow, this is a lot of dudes, and if he's a good opponent, he's going to try and figure out how he's going to try to fracture your army. They're going to try and find either way to try and work on one flank and slow down the rest, or they want to be sending in redirectors and smaller units to really break up your formation, make you trip over yourself, and make it so you start opening yourself up for flank attacks and all the rest. Especially if you have something that has frenzy or something like that, they're looking to really capitalize on that. Because I mean, if I see me on the other side and the Savage Orc Biggins, I'm going to get there and I'm going to try and set them up so they're going to redirect. They're going to run in front of another horde. They're going to block them, or the Savage Orc Biggins will eventually get stuck behind another horde, and all the rest of it, right? Just really trying to slow them down. Now, with this, one of the things that's absolutely important for your battle line is the idea that your hordes need to stay in formation. If I just go and say, hordes go, charge forward, you go and charge whatever's in front of you, my opponent will be able to pick this apart. And part of the discipline of using this is the whole idea is that I have 6 turns and I don't need to go and be rushing into your face. If I have to spend a turn or 2 killing off chaff and then moving up to really hit the heart of your army in the last 2 turns, that is better than me making desperate crazy charges and going all crazy just to try and clear things up and get things going. If you spend a turn throwing chaff in front of me, okay, I'll just spend that time killing that chaff, reforming into a unit. It could be a thing too, like if I see an eagle and it goes in front of my Savage Orc Biggins, I know that, okay, I could charge, I'll be forced to overrun, everything's going to be screwed up. What am I going to do instead? Well, I could be doing a thing where, okay, Savage Orc Biggins, I'm going to pass your frenzy test so you don't have to charge, and I'm going to make sure that I have the other elements of my army, say war machines or whatever else, so that Doom Divers kill that eagle, get it out of the way. From this point forward, all right, move up. And that's actually something you have to really be targeting big as well, is that in the first couple of turns there, where you are shooting at your opponent, you might be shooting your war machines not at the bigger blocks and the higher point reward targets on the other side. You might be just wanting to aim at their chaff. For example, if I'm looking across the field and I'm seeing a High Elf army and I see that they have a Frost Phoenix, I might be shooting my war machines at that eagle to make sure it's not going to be doing the redirecting, and so that it's basically lining it up so that the Frost Phoenix can get to the flank after, right? Those are the bigger things. At the same time, it starts getting very, very important that you're going to be thinking about terrain and thinking ahead, knowing that, okay, I'm going to be moving up here, I'm going to be engaging here. At this time, he's probably going to be redirecting this unit over here. And again, it's all about keeping that steady line, keeping your battle line stable all the way through, and that ability to look ahead 2-3 turns to say that, okay, these guys are basically going to be able to clean up this flank here, then they can reform, and they're basically going to hold up while I go and clean up things here, then I can move forward, or whatever it needs to be, or if there's going to be terrain in the way, right? Okay, I see that this terrain is going to allow this horde through, but not this other horde. So this one is going to have to go through there. Or if I can't sneak through there, okay, this horde is going to have to rush up. It's going to block off that hole. These guys are going to come up, kill off this. Okay, now we have another building, so I'm going to have to make sure I hold here. And meanwhile, this is going to have to sweep around the other side, right? Hold that battle line. Don't just rush up and go crazy. All right, I think I've gone on long enough about that one. And now we go into one of my more fun zones, and this is more 5 hordes. I'm going to stop at 5 because it really is possible to do this later on, but from that point I'd be really just repeating myself. And because really what you get to 5 hordes is you normally have one of 2 situations. One, you're going to be in a spot where, hey, you know what, there's almost no terrain that matters whatsoever. I am board edge to board edge. All I have to do is march up the whole line, and I'm going to kick your butt. That usually is not the case. Usually there's something there saying, I will not be able to be going from board edge to board edge, going all the way up and keep this battle line. And so normally what I'm going to start doing there is I'm going to start doubling up. And this is the whole idea of layering hordes. And I would think that one of the biggest spots where I use this the most effectively is up against Ogre Kingdoms. And Ogre Kingdoms, you're almost guaranteed to see they're going to have some sort of gut star or type thing there. And really what that is just a big block of ogres with characters. Now, I can go in there with my Savage Orc Biggins. I can kick their butt, but they're going to kick my butt too. And depending on what magic they have and what characters and what abilities, this could get really dicey and I could lose and my whole army could fall apart if things really start chain reacting. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to layer my force. First of all, I'm going to be putting up the Black Orcs. The Black Orcs, their job is to engage first, put all their attacks into characters, kill those characters off so that when the second horde comes behind, the Savage Orc Biggins, now I don't have to worry about that Fire Belly adding in the extra damage from his breath weapon. I don't need to be worrying about Crown of Commands and stuff like that. I am just going to get in there. I'm going to kill those characters. And then after, I'm going to be following up with the Savage Orc Biggins to direct all my attacks at the actual unit, win by a bunch, and then go through. And you know, like I said, this is biggest there, but the nice thing about the 5 hordes is, whereas before, I could always layer up like that, but that's really just making it so I'm taking up a very small footprint of the whole battlescape, and they're able to kind of swing around and do other things. Now that I'm so wide across, I can layer myself, not knowing that I'm covering enough that I'm not going to be, they're not going to be able to get to that back horde to stop it from doing its job. At the same time, too, I might have it so that that back horde is going to be something where it's going to be filling in wherever I need it. Maybe I have my 4 hordes in the front and then kind of center on the back. This horde is actually more like a bunker. I'm going to have my characters in there, and then wherever I see that my lines are getting weaker, all right, that back horde is going to go over that way. I'm going to be supporting on that side. And you can really go with it that way. Another thing you can do too is if you have a very fast horde, is I can really say like, okay, these guys, I'm going to be just sending in and going suicidal. And they're going to go in, they're going to do as much damage as they can, and then really that back layer is going to fill in for them, and my battle line is going to come in behind after they've really had to dedicate a lot to deal with that one horde. So if you do have one that's a little bit faster, or if you're in a position where you have a lot of range abilities, so you can be setting in them and shooting that and then closing the game after you fractured their battle line. And again, this is a whole thing where you have to remember, you don't have to win the game for every turn. You have to win the game after 6 turns. So if you can send in that first horde first and break up their formation and send away the steam tank so that all of a sudden now you can go up and clean through, that's worth it, right? So it starts getting really complicated here because we don't know. It's all about situation to situation. But now I think I want to draw it back and talk about a few other things that can really be holding back your hordes. And that really has to do with the spacing that they have from each other into terrain. We talked about before that you have to be an inch away from the terrain. Well, you also have to be an inch away from the other units. And what that can really mean is that if I have two hordes side by side, they're an inch away from each other, and one wants to go up and charge a unit on one side, it could be that they can't wheel, because in wheeling, their back edge is going to hit. And if they move up the clear first, maybe now they'll be clipping some building or something else before they get there. So what starts to be more important is that if you are not going to be in a situation where hordes are going to be engaging what's exactly in front of them, you have to make sure you give that little extra space between them. Don't just give the 1 inch, give 3-4 inches, whatever you need, so that they're spaced out. A lot of times, one of the things I like to do is I'll put something between them. Say when I used to do the solo troll. So horde number 1, solo troll, and then horde number 2. That troll is going to zip out and be out of the way, and meanwhile I have that nice gap between the hordes so that whatever way they need to wheel and go, that's not going to be a problem. Another part of that too is that when you're taking your hordes, and if you're in a position where you're going to be teaming up, say 2 hordes against 1 or whatever, you want to make sure that when they charge the one, the other one can be supporting in a following turn. And to do that, you have to really keep in mind that now they have such a wide footprint that they could go and attack like a far corner so that the horde that's right beside can't even see them over there. So make sure that you're wheeling them just a bit so that they can see each other, but not wheeling enough that if they decide not to charge you, that you can't close the door to keep on walking, right? They'd be very happy to threaten you with something like a Frost Phoenix or whatever, and be like, okay, come at me, now you can't hit it without the other one supporting, and then they don't charge, and like, damn it, I can't go, I'm stuck here, and they're just going to shoot you up, or dwellers, or whatever. So you just got to think ahead and make sure that whatever maneuver you would need to do, whether I need to swing over that way, go wherever, that you're going to have that space to wheel them. And really, with having that large footprint, it's one of those things that as a new player to it, you probably bumble into it a lot, right? You're just an inch away, you're hitting each other, and that's really the problem. But more experienced players will kind of have that wheel template in their head, and they can know, okay, I need this much room. Eventually, the best thing to do is that if you can really master the art of deployment and make sure that even though I have hordes, that I have cheap units too. Very, very cheap units, be them, whether they're eagles or for the orcs and goblins, that they're just cheap little units of wolves. Just little drops that I can do first, so that by the time that I am doing the hordes are designed to go straight up. If I am designing my battle line at deployment saying, you have to go straight up to fight these guys, you have to go straight up to fight these guys, and there's going to be no crisscrossing or no swinging around, that makes it so much easier. So definitely, if that's something where you're very strong with, or if you're not strong with, just get that extra practice with it. Make sure that you're adding in these cheap units so you can really throw them down. And, sometimes too, like one of my throwaway units will be the bunker, because the bunker is always going to be in the back middle. So I can throw that down, and I can already see a little bit more information from them. Oh, okay, they just placed down their demigryphs, black orcs. You're going right there, right? So that's really it. This is a long work tactical team, because there's a lot to talk about here. But really, hordes, very, very powerful. You just have to really be having a plan for them, knowing that depending on how many hordes you have is going to change the way that you need to use them, in the way that you need to protect them sometimes, in that, sometimes, like I said, you get into spots where you need to slow yourself down, times where you need to layer, but the best thing to remember is that this is a 6-turn game, and you have the unit that's going to be crushing them, and whether you get there on turn 2 or turn 6, it's going to be crush time. So there you go. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you later. Bye.